Welcome to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast, brought to you by DonorSearch, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders, innovators, and changemakers in fundraising, philanthropy, and civil society. I'm your host, Jay Frost. In today's episode, we speak with Brian Lacy, a longtime leader in the field of sustained giving in the U.S. and Canada. Brian takes us on a journey from his college days at the University of Toronto through to leading the program at the University of Connecticut, and finally running his own firm today out of Texas. Along the way, he shares his reflections on the faith, family, and philanthropy that has sustained him in the darkest hours and given him the strength to help others navigate their own greatest challenges at work and at home.
Let me go back in time a little bit. In my junior year, between my junior and senior year that summer, I got a job at a lab at the university. As many biology students, the coveted jobs where you get a job at a lab, right? You know, in case you want to go into science, right? You want to have a nice resume that says you worked in a lab. And I worked in a lab, and as much as I loved the people, I hated it. So I went into my senior year of college. You know, you're 3 years in with your biology degree and anthropology degree, knowing that you do not want to work in a lab when you graduate. And so hence the reason why probably when I participated in the phonathon, I probably participated more eagerly. I think I knew I wanted to be in fundraising more than I wanted to be a scientist.
It's not something that a lot of people know. Everybody I talk to in the field, they'll say that it was just something they sort of fell into, but you made a choice, a conscious choice.
Yeah, I probably made a choice, but probably the choice was made somewhere around the end of my third year of college.
But what was it that attracted you to it? What was so appealing about making those phone calls to strangers? That's what most people fear, and you didn't.
Well, I think what I liked about it was I love, well, in fact, and I love that it was metrics based. And that's why, as you know, in my business today, I lean more towards annual giving than I do towards major gifts, right? I lean towards science and less the art of it, right? I loved the fact that, and I loved it when I was at the University of Toronto. When I got the full-time position, I loved the fact that I knew exactly what they had done last September and what I had to do to beat it. And I loved, okay, this is how they ended the year last. This is their December 31 number, donors, gifts, etc. This is where I want to be, you know? And so of course that fed itself. I was probably very fortunate to come in at a time at the University of Toronto of rapid growth, and we did incredible things. We had a very interesting development office at the University of Toronto. There was a lot of super talented people. They, you know, and of course, because I was working there, as you know, in our profession, colleges and universities tend to have the better tools. They tend to be better funded. And then of course I'm at the University of Toronto, which is running the largest development campaigns in Canada. So that was exciting, right? To be a part of all that and to see the people involved in all that, and to, you know, to sort of, you know, you're getting a whiff of it every day. My desk was less than 25 feet from the front door of the development office on the ground floor. So I saw one after another of the Canadian establishment walking in with the university president to meet with the vice president of development. You know,
I guess this is when John Delandria was running the office, maybe, or
even before John Delandria, Gordon Cressy, you know, but Rivi Frankel, she's been at Rivi Frankel's. Yeah, and she still runs, you know, Ryerson. Their development program. But Rivi Frankel was on the third floor of our building, because back when I was doing my job, she was director of alumni affairs. But Rivi Frankel, John Delandria, Gordon Cressy, but also the people coming through the door were, you know, $1 million donor after another $1 million. And of course, we thought it was a big deal then, because they announced when I was there, we did the $300 million breakthrough campaign. And that was, at the time, the largest campaign of its kind in Canada. The University of Toronto right now just blew through a $2 billion campaign. And I think the next one they've announced is a $4 billion campaign. So they're not quite USC /Stanford /Harvard yet, but They're in the top 10 in North America.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
but a lot of that was built on the work that you were doing, the work that all your colleagues were doing. And it was relatively new there. As you said, it was one of so many universities reaching out to alumni, maybe in some cases for the first time, or at least in that way for the first time. Isn't that right? Because there was a lot of support.
Yes. Now, there's other folks that have been around as long as you and I have might know some of these names, but IDC was, we were I think, one of IDC's 4 or 5 first clients, and they were doing capital campaign calls, in an office building, 5 or 6 blocks away, while I was doing annual fund calling in the basement of that building. And, we went to see what they were doing over at IDC. We went to the basement of the Royal Ontario Museum is basically surrounded by the University of Toronto. If you've ever been to the Royal Ontario Museum, it's right near Queen's Park, but so is the University of Toronto, and the University of Toronto owns a ton of land, and it's sort of right there. We went to the basement to see how they were doing all their membership calling. I had a boss who was about, okay, which programs do we like? Let's now go and see what they're doing.
So they weren't threatened by that. There wasn't this feeling that, no, that's a state secret. People were willing to bring one another in and share what they knew. And
I think that continues to be one of the things that is nice about our field, right? I think you can go to AFP conferences and people will share how their nonprofit raises money. You can go to case conferences, and colleges and universities will share, this is how we do it. And, and the joke that most of us know, if we've been around long enough, that CASE stands for copy and steal everything. We were doing that even before I'd ever heard that term. We were going everywhere and copy and stealing everything we could get our hands on. But again, that has sunk in with me. I have tried to be a good mentor to others over my career, because it mattered to me. And I started running the phone center. Of course, the person who runs the phone center basically works from noon till 10 at night, right? Because the calling happens at night.
Right.
And so, most people in that position do it for about 1.5 years, which is about what I did. And then I got the position running the direct mail. So, lots of phone experience. Now I'll go and I'll graduate to the direct mail position, and I worked there for another 1.5 years. While I wasn't the director of annual giving, I basically had a lot of the responsibilities of the director of annual giving in my final year, because the position was vacant. It was vacant for like 9 months. So I was the senior person in annual giving there. And again, I got all kinds of exposure and opportunity because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then what happened? How did you decide to leave this place where so much of your work was?
I think you decide. So a director finally was hired. So it wasn't me, and I kind of understood that I wasn't being considered. So I think at that point, I think like a lot of people, you just start looking for director jobs. You've been an assistant director for 2.5 years. You start looking, and I took a director of annual giving position at a smaller university in Canada called Trent University. It's about 1 hour and 40 minutes north and east of the city of Toronto, in a place called Peterborough. So,
and you were there for how long at Trent?
I was there for 3 years. Yeah,
for 3 years.
Yep.
And was that a big piece of your story, or was that kind of
that was a great place. Loved it. Again, lucky, fortunate. Susan Mackle, friend of mine to this day, was my boss. She was the VP. It was neat because one of the things that Trent helped me do is much smaller place. So of course you did more in a small place. Other things that happened in a small place. There's a little bit of the big fish, small pond thing starts to happen to you, right? So we were by far, at the University of Toronto, we were by far the biggest fundraisers, but there were also huge hospitals and, huge other fundraising organizations, right? When we got to Peterborough, we were the university was the biggest fundraiser in town. The United Way fiercely recruited. So I was immediately asked to serve on the United Way board, and I did. Susan basically volunteered me or whatever, so I worked on the United Way board. I met probably the 10 or 20 wealthiest people in Peterborough, and they were indeed wealthy people. And I got the experience of being like a college town, right?
Right.
And so that impacted my ability to go to the States and say, yeah, I can live in that college town. I can live in that college town. I can enjoy this. And I did. I became a big brother. The director of alumni affairs, still a good friend, Tony Story. He was on the board of Big Brother, Big Sister. So he encouraged me to be a big, and I did that. And that was something where I thought, that's real service. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the work on the United Way board, enjoyed that service, so the people were setting me up. I always say that both Susan and Tony, they set me up to be successful, helped me, but they also set me up. Tony set me up, like he told the people at the Big Brother, Big Sister, he's like, you're going to give Brian somebody, you're going to give him a nice kid, you're going to give him a nice kid with a mom who has a full-time job, and he just wanted me to have a good first experience so that I would speak favorably about it. Because a lot of people have the last thing you want when you're a big is if your first experience is that you pick up a kid and you go out and you come home and you're supposed to drop the kid off and nobody's home, and all of the things, and those are things that go wrong in social service, stuff. Again, fortunate and blessed as a kid growing up in an upper middle class family, fortunate to have, sort of one mentor after another that was encouraging and positive and smart and bright and people with senses of humor, Susan Mackle she came to Peterborough from the Toronto market, and she came as she came out of the healthcare market. She was a VP at a major hospital camp in Houston in the development area. And Susan as a result, got into the habit of going to a tremendous number of funerals, because if you are a VP of development in healthcare, you go to a lot of funerals. Because sometimes the people making the biggest gifts and the estate gifts and things are coming from people who pass away. And anyway, Susan just, maybe we'll go there another time too. There are actually funny stories about development and funerals.
I'll have to see if she'll come on board and tell us some of those.
There you go. Yeah, I'll save that for her. She would be great. Yeah.
But you talked about service here, and being from this kind of family, an upper middle class family, but you didn't mention that service was actually a part of growing up. So, I mean, some people discover it because they have a good experience and then they enjoy it and they keep doing it. Was this already in you? Did you already know that these are the kinds of things you like to do with your time?
Yeah, absolutely. While still in high school, while still in college, I go to an evangelical church now, and sort of have since I came to Texas. But I was born and raised Catholic, and so we were involved in the church's solicitation campaigns early on. We were encouraged to give. My parents encouraged us to give to the church. My parents encouraged us to help the church in fundraising. The church in Canada runs a thing called Share Life. It's kind of a competitor to the United Way, to be perfectly honest, and the Catholic Church. Some say the Catholic Church created it about 40 or 50, well, maybe 50 years ago now, when United Way began, supporting abortion. The Catholic Church came up with this, and it was an idea to give Catholics an option that you could support lots of things in the community, just not abortion. Anyway, the parishes would solicit, yes, obviously from the pulpit, they can do that. Mm-hmm. But then what they would do is once a year for about a month, they would go and visit all the lapsed Catholics who didn't come to church. And so we did that. As my parents would encourage us. And I think my brothers and sisters all at least once or twice participated in that. where you would go neighborhood to neighborhood you'd have a card and it would say that this is the home of
right.
the Mraz family, Sue and Gerald, and you would go knock on the door and remind them that, hey, it's the annual Share Life campaign. The bishop has asked us to come and visit you, and so we would do that. I grew up going to Catholic school growing up, and I was a part of the Mission Society. So I did mission trips. We raised money. We collected, food baskets and distributed food baskets at Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter. So yeah, I did those things as a kid growing up, for sure.
Yeah. So that was all a part of who you were by the time you had the opportunity to do these jobs.
Yeah, by the time I got to college. So in fact, that might have, maybe we did this little talk in the wrong order. That's probably why I found getting on the phone and asking for, alumni to give not that difficult, alumni and parents to give, because
right.
I'd done it in high school.
Sure. You were comfortable having that conversation. So then you went on again and you were there, and then you talked about how, I can't remember how you said it now, but it kind of prepared you to be able to move farther afield, and everything now is still Toronto, Ontario, Peterborough, but then you go to the United States, which must have been kind of how did that happen? Why did that happen?
Okay. Well, that's easy. Love. So, on a trip to Boston, I met my first wife. So I met my first wife when I was visiting Boston. I went down with a couple of college friends. We went down for a weekend, and I met her. She hung out with us for a couple of meals with my friends. And then I decided I really liked her, so I was going to visit her. So I began to take these 12-hour drives from Peterborough, Ontario to Boston.
Oh, wow.
Once a month. Mm-hmm. I'd drive there on a Friday, arrive at like 2 a.m, spend the weekend with her, and then drive back on Sunday night, or maybe on Monday if it was a holiday weekend. So I started seeing her maybe once a month, maybe every other month. She was going to Boston University Law School. So she was finishing a law degree. So she wasn't, I was probably 5 years older than her at that point.
So that was why you started coming down south, but it doesn't really explain the next big leap, which was to Kent State.
Sure it does. Because when you start dating an American, so what happens is you start dating an American and you say, okay, this is a person I want to marry. Then you say to yourself, well, she can't really come to Canada because she's gone to an American law school and studied American law, so she can't move to Canada. But I'm a fundraiser, and there's way more fundraising positions in Canada. In fact, there's not 60 universities. There's 3,400. So I just started applying to American universities. And I got a job at, not Kent State, I got a job at St. Francis College in Loretto, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Yeah, I got the order out of sequence, but that might have even seemed more obscure to somebody from Toronto, because that's not, it's not unknown. A big place.
Didn't know it existed until I applied to them. Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you took over the shop there. I mean, isn't that right?
No, I took over the annual fund. I ran again, a small shop, 3-people shop, VP of development, director of annual giving, corporate and foundation relations person. It was a 3-person shop.
Sure. What was the biggest difference between what you were doing before and then that environment in terms of raising money, but the culture of the office?
Comparing that to Trent University, that was almost directly a lateral move. Okay. So it was a completely lateral move. Now, ironically, and I was taking it so that I could get a job in the States, because immediately my first wife moved to join me, and we got married like 6 months later. So we got married. We were living in Pennsylvania when I got married. It turned out what I was being paid in Canada, they thought was quite a lot, and they ended up matching it. And I thought, well, this is a lateral move. But then I realized I had moved to a part of the United States which was very inexpensive to live in. So in fact, the fact that I got the same money and the same title and was doing the same kind of work, number one, the money went a lot further. This was a town in the Allegheny Mountains where, well, in fact, I bought one house for $45,000, and then I bought another house I bought an incredible house, and it only cost $110,000. It was literally amazing. So it was just, and the very fact that at that point, I think I was 30 years old, and I owned two houses in this town in Pennsylvania I'd lived in less than 6 months. Things were possible. But the other thing is, even though it was a lateral movement and so on and so forth, I was raising more money because it was a small private Catholic college. And I was raising the annual fund. I was raising $1 million a year. And the entire budget of the university was, I want to say it was $15 million a year. So I was raising like 8% of the college budget.
Yeah.
Whereas in the University of Toronto, I was raising, or rather at Trent University, I was raising $400,000. And in a place that had a budget of, 150 million or something, I was raising 0.03% of the budget.
Right.
And anyway, I began to learn then about, you learn all kinds of things. You learn, when you start out in development, you think, we're the money bread, we're the breadwinners, we're this, we're that, we're this, we're that. And you begin to get a bit of a big head. And then you get to a private college and you realize, 85% of the money supporting this college, or 80% of the money supporting this college, is coming from admissions. Admissions are the people that matter. You begin to realize, you get sort of shocked out of that. This sort of sense that, you're big dogs on campus.
That must have been humbling.
Yeah, a little bit. You're like, but we did raise a big chunk, and we raised a big chunk of money. But of course, you also knew that you had a pretty severe responsibility, because if you didn't hit goal, somebody on campus was being laid off. I mean, it was, the school, this was not a school that had huge endowments, This was a school that was doing okay. They had done a bunch of smart stuff, but at the time I was joining them, I mean, I can name in New York State alone, I can name a dozen colleges that sound like Catholic colleges that the Catholic diocese sold to the state, Nazareth, and I've done work for some of them. Nazareth College. These are all Carlow College. There's a whole bunch of colleges that the Catholic Church sold in the 70s and 80s because they just couldn't make a go of it. But this was a college that made a go of it, and what they had done early on was they went heavily into the health sciences. So by the time I left there, I worked there for 3 years. When I left there, 45% of their students were health science majors, either nursing, physical therapy, occupational therapy, physician's assistants. They did have the oldest physician's assistants program in the country. When I was there, it was 150 years old. So it's got to be 175 years old now, or 180 years old. But yeah, and so what they saw was, because those kids all graduate into high-paying jobs, therefore they'll pay a private college tuition. So anyway, but
they weren't afraid to go out and ask the alumni for support. I mean, some of the other schools, not specifically those you mentioned, but many schools during that period were relying on other sources of revenue, and then suddenly, they needed to go and do this, and some didn't, and some
and we were that, and that was where and although I had done a little bit of it at Trent University, just a teeny bit. I'd gotten in my car and driven around Peterborough and talked to some leadership gift donors in Peterborough, but I never got in my car and went anywhere other than Peterborough or Toronto on behalf of Trent. Yes, for St. Francis College, I got in my car and I drove to Delaware, and I had an annual trip, and I would go to New York every year and see 8 or 10 donors in New York. And I would go to Philadelphia and see 4 or 5 donors in Philadelphia. This place had a footprint. St. Francis College had an alumni footprint that was largely Pennsylvania, New York, and Delaware. Yeah. And
sort of a leadership annual fund component. Is that roughly what it was?
Exactly. And, and had the experience of, staying in some alums' homes and staying in, anyway, and doing all that. And that was great. It was a good experience for me, and I grew in the position, and
And then you made it to Kent State. So I don't know, is that, again, you're just kind of looking for other things that are exciting to do and learn from? Or?
The annual fund, the annual fund thing in my pattern, I think in almost everywhere I was, it was 3 years, 3 years, 3 years, 3 years. So you get in there in year one, you're fixing things or changing things because you see things that could be done differently. So you make those changes, you get a nice bump. And the year after that, you're fixing and refining. Hopefully you still get another nice increase in your numbers. And then the third year, now I'm just managing a machine that I put into place, So
right.
I think from my head, it got less interesting. Almost all of those jobs became less of a challenge and less interesting after the third year.
It does kind of show how, though, I can imagine as a consultant today, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute, that must have almost been a model. The first year you go in there and you fix it. The second year you help them to grow. And the third year you make sure the machine still works. Were there some lessons that you took from those experiences that you're bringing to everybody you talk to now? And are there some?
Yeah. Absolutely. And then did it at increasingly larger places, Kent State and the University of Connecticut. Yeah, but exactly. Number one of the things that I always found interesting is everywhere I ever started work and almost everywhere I've ever been a consultant, I've been told, well, things are different here, and they are. Right. But sure. You know what? Good development works everywhere. Doing the right things works everywhere. And in my experience, generally doing the right annual giving stuff works everywhere, So, the key is to, in many of those places for me, and it continues to be, is to search out people's willingness to change. You have to help them. Sometimes you have to help them get there because they don't get there on their own naturally. They don't like to think that maybe they haven't been doing things in the best way, in which case as well, the incremental changes and letting them see the progress that's made sometimes is helpful. The good news is there are some pretty key things that I've done every single place I've been and with every single consulting partner, and I've never seen them not work. And I didn't create them. They were around before. Sean Elder taught them to me. Susan Mackel knew them, and she reminded me of them. And so we did these things that just carefully looking at opportunity. You're researching, you're paying attention, you're looking at the experience you're giving the donor. You're trying to make that a good experience. You're trying to tell stories. You're trying to share what they can do to impact the lives of others. You and I have had these conversations where, are you saving lives or are you changing lives? All of that is true. And it just, so bringing that, but again, looking for that willingness to change. Sometimes it's not an issue. Sometimes they literally say, what should we do? And then I would just go to sort of my tried, tested, and trues. And they generally work. Yeah. So then from there you went to Kent State and then finally to UConn before starting your own enterprise. And I know that those are a matter of scale. Kent State is obviously a substantial institution. UConn is kind of a monster. I mean, they in a lot of respects, they've done a lot of large scale work. What were the things that led you to those places? What did you take away from that experience? Why did you decide you'd had enough and then move on your own? Yeah, I think Kent State was just an opportunity. I got, I think that's the only time. Yeah, that's the only time I can, well, it's not the only time. That's the only time I can say I responded favorably to being headhunted. So I was approached to go there. So that was not me sort of looking. I was approached to go there. And I looked at the opportunity and thought, yeah, that's a good opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so, and it was bigger institution, more pay, and so on and so forth. Strangely enough, when I was living and working at St. Francis College, it was almost exactly a 6-hour drive to Mississauga. So I could get home in 6 hours in my car, Ironically, Kent State is almost exactly 6 hours from Mississauga as well. So it literally was like I moved from 6 o'clock straight south to roughly, what would that be, 8 o'clock on the dial, and so it was an opportunity to sort of, show the skills and the talents and bring abilities to bear. There was a bit of the opportunity to move came and we moved. Sure. And then from there, again, good stuff happening, great stuff happening, met tremendous people. Enjoyed my time at Kent State. By the time I got to Kent State, UConn, I'd been in development 14 years, maybe 15 years. And so all of the annual giving. So then I started to say, okay, well, and I also had a bigger team and I was doing things and we were having successes and things, but I thought to myself, you know what? I'll start consulting. So I started doing the consulting on the side while still employed full-time at the University of Connecticut. And then I really enjoyed that. And it was like, hey, you know what? I could improve. It's saying my, okay there? Okay. It was saying that my Wi-Fi was unstable, but I think
it is a little bit right now. Hopefully it'll come back online. You were a little unstable. Oh, it's better now.
So anyway, so that was the taste, right? So then I created the consulting firm. I began doing that on the side, and I began to think, I could either work for 5 or 6 institutions at a time, or I can work for one. And so that became the driving force behind, going into business for myself and all of that. And it all became hey, we're going to move to Texas. We'll just start all of this.
Right. And you didn't have any kids at that point, did you? Or did you?
No, I did. We had both. Yeah, both of my kids were born when I was living in Ohio. So they were both born when we were at Kent State. We went to Connecticut. Now that's not a happy part of the story. That's an unhappy part of the story. And in the sense that my wife said, hey, we should move to Texas. She was from Texas, like Houston. And we should move to Houston. And I said, okay, let's, you know what? We've always talked about the possibility of doing that. Let's do it, And we moved to Texas.
Well, wait. But why Texas? You had always talked about moving to Texas. Why?
That's my wife's hometown. Houston was her hometown.
I see. Okay.
So she was going to school in Boston, but yeah.
Okay.
So this is the first unhappy bit of my story. So she said, let's go to Houston, because at this point we have small children, right? Both of the children are under 3 years of age. And it's, hey, if you want to take a vacation as a couple, it's nice to have family around, maybe to watch the kids for a weekend,
Right.
And so we did. What I didn't know was, and I think I indicated my wife was an attorney. We got there, and 6 months plus 1 day, she filed for divorce. And that means that when she filed 6 months plus 1 day, that meant that because we'd been in Texas for 6 months, that was the state that the kids were going to be required to stay in. So I think she knew 6 months earlier she wanted to file for divorce. So she wanted to get the family into Houston before she did that. So
that's hard.
Part of our story.
Yeah.
It was. Well, I'll tell you I'm very comfortable about being honest about things. I cried a lot. That's the second most difficult thing to ever happen in my life. And I'll tell you what made it harder, Jay, was I was starting a business. I worked from home. I had no colleagues. So I had a small apartment, me at a desk, working. I had no colleagues that I would see every day. My network in the city of Houston at the time of the divorce was her family and her friends, and they immediately put up pretty significant barriers to me having any contact with any of them, because it just was too difficult for them, right? Even members of her family and friends who liked me would say, hey, we like you, but, she's our family, or we like you, but she's asked us not to talk to you, or, things like that. So that was really, really hard, really, really hard. And to the point where there were times when different members of my family, and of course my family's in Toronto, Canada, about 1,400 miles away. So that was tough. It wasn't like anybody could drive down and visit me for the weekend. We were no longer driving distance. That's a 32-hour drive. I've done it. So it was hard. And, but part of what saved me in that situation, I think, was we were members of a tennis club. So I kept playing at the tennis club. And I had experiences where sort of total strangers kind of fell in my lap. Again, for me, that's a God thing, right? Opportunities came up. And I literally would go to the tennis club every single day. So at 5:00 every day, I would make myself a peanut butter sandwich or a ham sandwich, and I would eat it quickly. And I would go to the tennis club even when I didn't have anything scheduled. And I would sit and wait because somebody would say, hey, I need somebody to hit with, or hey, we got 3 today. You want to come play with us? Or, so I did that. I was at the tennis club, and I probably got into better shape than I've ever been in my life. So, yeah.
Wow. Did you also find, even though you were now in this place, which was not home, it was your new home, but you were isolated there, it sounds like, aside from the tennis club. What about within the community of development? I know that since you were beginning your business, you're probably starting to go to shows, doing different things, speaking. So how did that play into your ability to kind of remake things?
Yeah, well, it did. Yeah, all of that helped. So development became my world. So I have relationships. I was working at the time, in addition to doing my own stuff, I was working, doing a lot of work for HEP Development, which is based in Virginia, and I was representing them at all their trade shows. So I wasn't an employee of HEP, but I was a 1099, but I was doing 100% of their trade shows. So I was traveling around the country. Where it didn't help was and I would say this to people. I had in the first year or two after my divorce, I had way more Chicago clients than I had clients in Houston. I think I only had like one client in Houston. It wasn't like I knew a ton of people in Houston, right? I had more clients in Chicago than I had in Houston. I had more clients in California than I had in the state of Texas. It just, so personally, but I was doing that. I was traveling, and I had relationships, and I had friendships, and I had relationships with people in Canada, and I had partnerships and things like that. I've got friends in Ohio. There's a direct mail firm in Ohio where I know all the salespeople, but I've known the owner for 30 years. I've known his top 2 salespeople for more than 25 years. So I would go to trade shows and hang out with these people that I knew. So that was my social. But of course, what it meant was when I was in Houston, and then when I was in Houston, I was a good father. So I took every minute I could with my kids, every minute that I was legally permitted, spend a little bit of money in the first 3 years since I was divorced, fighting with my ex-wife for more and more and more custody time. So it wasn't great to be fighting, but I ended up with a divorce agreement that had me spending more time with those kids than 98% of fathers in Texas get to spend with their kids when they get divorced.
Right.
And so I did that. So when I was in Texas, I was with my kids. When I was on the road working, I was just working. And I will say this, unfortunately, again, there's the whole crucible of flames, right? Or getting, worked over in the crucible, or going through the situations, the fires and the tragedies and things like that. You can come out. I'm not going to say you do for sure. You can come out the other side stronger. For me, I probably, because I was alone at that point, and I probably worked 70, 80 hours a week, and I found the work comforting because I wasn't thinking about my personal circumstances, so to speak. So that, it let me focus. The work was a distraction, but also when you spend a lot of time at it, you can make some money, build some relationships, build a business.
And partnerships are a huge part of your work. I mean, I know that personally, it's been a discussion we've had offline, but it wasn't just with HEP Development, although you did a lot of work with them, but lots of other companies, as well as individual clients. So it sounds like that's a part of your whole story, is building these relationships. Sometimes people were mentoring you, sometimes you were mentoring others, but finding these friendships where you could help one another, whether it was, right there in your first job or at the tennis club, was a big feature of this. So what part has that played in the development of the firm and the work that you do now?
Well, yeah, I think it's had a big part, but it's all different kinds of ways, So, I sell, in addition to doing the wealth screening, in addition to doing consulting, as you know, I sell wealth screening services. Well, that's helpful. Many of the consulting firms out there that are my size, larger and smaller, will offer a screening service, right? Because it's a process. Most nonprofits that think about they want to do a campaign or what have you, need to know where their opportunities within their database lie. So they need to do a screening. Many of them need to do a screening. So having a relationship with a screening company, and again, these relationships start. You have a relationship with somebody when they're with one firm, and the next thing you know, they're in another firm. The next thing you know, they're starting a company. So yeah, my relationship with people like yourself and people like Bill Tedesco began before DonorSearch existed. So I've been a reseller and a partner of DonorSearch's since its earliest days. As I said, I've got a direct mail. I've got friends. MCR is a direct mail company that is probably, it may not be the largest in higher education, but it's certainly one of the largest. It may have the most higher ed clients in America. I was their second higher ed client. Akron was their first. I was working at Kent State. I was their second. I have a 30-year relationship with them. So when I need to sort of leverage sort of friendships and things like that, and I'm gonna and ask a favor, I can get a favor from my client. I can get my client assisted this way or that way. Knowing people means that, as you know, in consulting firms now, a lot of us work we're working for multiple jobs. We're working maybe full-time here and we do part-time work here, or maybe we have a variety of partners. Simply knowing a lot of people I think I can save my clients time. I think I can save them money by saying to them, hey, you know what? I know you're doing this with these folks, but in my experience, they're not the best. Or in my experience, they're the same as everybody else and they just cost more. So let's, and you're telling me you don't have money for a wealth screening, and I'm telling you that you've got the money, you're just currently spending it in a way that you could spend it differently. So, you can help people. You can help people figure out some of this. And that comes from, as you know, as I do, from being in the business over 30 years. And it's just, sometimes we can save them having to trial and error it for the next 10 years by saying, we've done all the trial and error. Please let us help you skip that 10 years of pain that isn't going to get you much. Sometimes you can't, but sometimes you can, and people will let you, bring your experience to bear and save them time, money. And then just bringing good relationships to people. I think as well, going back to where we are, my pattern in these different shops where I'm in and out in 3 years, and these days that's considered a long time in development. But when I look at my pattern, one of the things I bring to clients is I don't want to be around forever. I would much rather help you see the opportunities that exist in your situation, show you how to do things in the way that will get the best possible results, whether that's annual giving or major gifts. And then get you trained so you understand how to do it, and then leave and get out of your way, because quite frankly, you don't need to be paying a consultant for the next 3 to 5 years if what you need is 2 years of assistance and maybe a year and a half of correcting the way your program is running, and then 6 months of training so that you can run it yourself. You don't need to be paying, a consulting firm for the next 10 years.
I wanted to ask you about one piece of that. So the thing that seems to be consistent in what you're talking about is these building of these relationships, whether they're ones you've had for 30 years or they're ones you develop where you are. It's just a part of who you are. That's also a part of how you work. But you also just talked about how some things have changed. And one of those changes is 3 years is a long window these days. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it seems to be. What else has changed and in this field since you began that's really making a big mark on not only the advice you provide, but how you see people working in fundraising generally, how it's changed fundraising as a whole?
Well, obviously the things we're hearing talked about more and more and more are things like diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think it's important that these things are talked about. And you've heard me talk about how it was an opportunity for me to work 80 hours a week and so on and so forth. But admitting that was a distraction, right, from a difficult time in my life when I was felt very much alone. So I filled it with work, and that worked out okay for me. But I think we know now that work-life balance is important. I think we know more than ever before that diversity, equity, and inclusion are important. And these things are making an impact. Beginning my career as I did in annual giving, I'll tell you, there's typically more women than men. Typically more women than men in development, in annual giving development, at least in higher education institutions. Mm-hmm. But there were always more men in the VP roles than there were women. So clearly we had the same issues with respect to equity, women who took time off to have families and things like that, maybe struggled to get positions that they shouldn't have struggled to get. People may have hired men because they assumed that even if, in my situation when I was in Ohio, I don't think anyone at Kent State worried that as my ex-wife was having our 2 kids, that it was going to impact my ability to work.
Right.
But nobody was rushing out to give her, they gave her adjunct positions. Nobody was offering her anything more than adjunct positions, probably because she had young children, So I think that's an issue. Also, as I said, while I talk about the hours I worked as a great thing, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to me personally. There's a cost to my family. There's a cost to all of us. And I think that, anyway, we're all learning about work-life balance, right? I mean, that we have to be healthy. It's funny. And I totally am blessed and spoiled, but right now I was just looking at some stuff last night, and I realized that I've got in my future, I've got 6 vacations already planned. It's insane. I've never had this happen before.
Where are you going?
I've got a cruise in July, a Greek cruise, Greece and Turkey in July. I've got a cruise in 2023. Where are we even going on that one? I don't even know, Jay. I can't remember. That one will come to me. I've got 3 weekends in Mexico planned in Mexico. Now that's for us here in Houston, that's a less than 2-hour flight. So I've got 3 weekends planned in Mexico between now and next January, already on the calendar, booked the plane tickets and all that. And if you had ever told me that I'd ever have 2 vacations planned at the same time, I'd say no. But my wife and I I'm remarried. My wife and I highly value travel. We also highly value getting away and being together and spending time together. And so we do that. And we also, because we recognize what's it all about. We've both struggled with, we both faced tragedy and things like that, both faced difficulties. So that's important. But anyway, and I've also discovered in my life, as a result of a whole variety of personal experiences, that we do live in a world with tremendous bias. We do live in a world with tremendous inequity. We do live with, and I've known that for a long time, but it comes into sharper relief when you realize, when you just experience it more and more and more over time, you know. I have a group situation. I have a group that I run in my home 2 Thursdays a month, and I'm not sharing anything that she has not told me I can't share. But I know there's a woman there who lost her son, and there was, at best, a shoddy investigation of it because he was African American. Horrible.
Yeah.
But if I'm honest, I mean, we've all known that forever. So it's brought home when the person you're sitting with is right there and is somebody you would call a friend, right? And then, you know, so these kinds of things, that, you know, as I said, you know, my ex-wife, you know, never getting anything more than an adjunct position. Again, might not have had anything to do with the fact that she was, it might not have had anything to do with the fact that she was in her childbearing years and had a little one at home, but it might have, because she did have, you know, tremendous grades from the University of Texas. She did have a law degree from BU. She did have a master's of communications, and, you know, she did have everything that she would need to get more than an adjunct position, but didn't. You know, and also had passed the bar at that point, already passed the bar in 3 different states at that point. You know, so you know, she had real ability. So, you know, but all of that, you know, but again, yeah. So that's a challenge. You know,
you've been working now with the business out of Texas this whole time now. This is I guess about 18 years. Is that right?
That's right.
Working with this huge range of clients all around the country, sometimes beyond. And you've just described how the work-life balance, the choices that you've made for yourself now with a new marriage and a happy house, looks a little bit like a church, like I said earlier. But that you seem to be in a different place. How are the changes for you, and how are they impacting both the work you do, but also how you're working with others? You just mentioned a group in your home, and I know that you do work with others as they navigate tragedies in their lives. How is that informing your life today?
So I lost my son, Connor. He was a 19-year-old sophomore student at the University of Houston, and he jumped from a building on September 20, 2017. Now, huge impact, obviously. It still makes my voice shake. It still brings me to tears, plenty. But at the same time, we have moved to a place where we choose to, you know, remember him, celebrate him. We include him. We talk about him when we're on vacation. My family is tremendous in that. We all continue to want to include Connor in our thoughts and so forth. So we do, and we share when we're together, we talk about him. But I do run this group twice a month, and I help other people going through the same difficulty and tragedy of that kind of loss. But really recently, about a month ago, all of a sudden it kind of struck me that I said, you know, how did this happen to Connor? Like, how did he get himself in such a way that, you know, that he thought that this was the only answer for him? And because he didn't actively show any signs of depression and things like that. Connor suffered from Asperger's, so he'd always been somebody who self-isolated, but we just thought that was his preference. But for me, what ended up coming to what I came to was an understanding that we don't include people with Asperger's in our society, much like we don't include people who are trans, much like we don't include people who are gay if we think they shouldn't be gay, much like, so all of a sudden for me, the diversity, equity, inclusion argument became and I take it back to my faith. It's like, yeah, we don't need to be judging. We just need to love one another. And we don't need to be, I don't need to be judging you. And we need more acceptance. Ultimately, my son, in part, took his own life because he couldn't fit into a world that didn't let him have a place. And I think to myself, that's tragic, right? That is tragic. And, Connor had all kinds of incredible talents. He could do things that no one else in our family could do. And yet at the same time, this world didn't let him, he couldn't see a place for himself. And that's crazy. I mean, that's terrible. So for me, that's kind of where the diversity, equity, inclusion thing in part falls to. I'm looking at that in a very different way now. Yes, equity for employment, equity for resources, all of those things, but we just need to have a world that allows people to find their place, and I don't know entirely how we do that. I used to think years ago, from the time I was a big brother, I thought eventually in my career, I'm going to do a bunch of volunteer work. I'm going to become a big brother. And maybe when I'm retired, I'll be a big to like 5 or 6 kids, because I thought that's a great organization and it helps people and I can do that. But now maybe my path at some point will be different. Maybe it'll be trying to figure out how to encourage more people to employ people who are different from themselves, just encouraging people to just accept people who are different from themselves and not figure out that we all have to be God and judging others.
This is something that has occupied your life in a big way because of your son, both your sons, and their importance to you. Faith, family, and philanthropy are things that have been key throughout your whole life. And on a happier note, you've also taken initiative to bring people to the United States for study. You've taken multiple mission trips abroad, none of which you've really talked much about, not just here, but elsewhere. But these things are important to you, but you're also quiet about them. And I wonder if you reflect on that as you think about the way to encourage others to find the solace and companionship and of others as they navigate their own difficulties. You seem to have found some places where even in the toughest times, you can do some good in the world. Can you talk about that?
I think I can. And I have enjoyed, and just so you know, I've enjoyed all those experiences. Service. We say it. We say it when we talk about, if we're asked to give talks about it, we talk about, hey, I'm not, when we talk about major gift fundraising, you'll raise more money if you first of all shed the notion that you're taking things away from people and you're actually giving them an opportunity to do something bigger than themselves, right? I'm not taking your $50,000. I'm allowing you to be a part of this incredible opportunity. And so I feel the same way about the mission trips I've been on, right? It was an opportunity. And as a young person, I would like to see far more young people in this country have an opportunity to go to a third world country and be of service and to care for people and to see how much of the world lives. And you actually don't have to go to a third world country. You can go to neighborhoods in most American cities. But I would encourage, but for me, it was impactful. I was changed. I went on, the first trip I went on, I think I was a high school senior, and I went to Haiti, and it changed me. At a bare minimum, it made me very appreciative of everything we have. At the time I was living in Canada, everything we have in Canada, everything we have in the United States, and so forth. I've been back several times since, now I understand more that, sometimes what we have is a direct response to what they don't have. I also worked at a grocery store as a kid growing up. I worked at A&P, the Great Atlantic and Pacific Company, and I literally have had this thought many times that, when sugar went on sale, you'd get a 5-pound bag of sugar. I mean, it's significant, right? I mean, more sugar than you could put in your coffee in years. And, this 5-pound bag of sugar and the A&P that would go on sale. And sometimes it would go on sale for 50 cents. 50 cents for a 5-pound bag of sugar. Mm-hmm. And what I learned in Haiti was to make that 5-pound bag of sugar, you had to cut down about a quarter of an acre of sugar cane, and you had to process it, and anyway, the whole process. And then, and what this teacher at my high school, Stella Petroni, had said, she goes, and you know how you do that? She was a sweet little lady. Her sister Stella's sister was a nun. And anyway, Stella would say, and you know how you do that? And you'd be like, and she's so, and we'd be like, how, Stella? She goes, you do it with slaves. And then we realized, and then of course, those were the people we were visiting in Haiti. In the Dominican Republic are these Haitian slaves, about 700,000 of them that live in the Dominican Republic, and they get paid $1 a day so that we can have sugar for 50 cents for 5-pound bags. And then you begin to realize, wait a second, sugar's in everything I eat in America. Yeah, it's bad for me. I'm gaining and I need to lose weight and everything else. It's bad for me, but it's in everything. And it's being harvested by slaves. And that's pretty much the world over, that sugar is harvested by slaves everywhere. And then you go on through the different understandings in your life, and you begin to see things. So when I can serve, I like to serve. I would like to probably do more of that. I have sort of half threatened. I never did take Connor. He never went to Haiti, but I did help. It was one gentleman go to school after the hurricane or the earthquake in Haiti that took down all the universities. I was helping a student go to school in Haiti. And then when all the universities were collapsed, I helped him go to school in Texas. And then it turned out to his 2 brothers after him coming, and I helped them less than I helped the first son go through college, but I helped them as well. But, so yeah, I do like to help people. I would like to help people more. I certainly see the benefit of that transformative experience that I had. I think that more people should have it. It's interesting. Ironically, there was a church that I attended. We don't attend now, but I attended for a while, and wealthy church, and had done quite well and had a surplus of money one year at the end of the year. And so what they did was, and I thought it was great. I don't know how well it was adopted, but they came out and they said, we would like every single family in this church to go on one of our mission trips, so much so that we will pay for it. And I think, so that's probably my ties to church is probably because I see churches doing that. Because I've quite frankly, after losing my son, I've had my periods of struggle with God. I've had my anger at God, why? But my anger at God wasn't like, why? I think I got away from that rather quickly. But it was more of a, hey, God, why have you made things relatively easy for me and you made things relatively hard for Connor? I find working easy. I find, interacting in this world as it's structured pretty easy. Connor didn't find anything easy, but then I realized, and I come around to that's not God. And, God gives us the opportunity. God gives all of us the opportunity to serve others. So anyway, I arrived at a different understanding, but, but that's where I think faith-based organizations have a real opportunity. I like the ones that are doing those kinds of things, and I support those kinds of things. And I think I'll continue to support those kind of things in my life, the rest of my life, I hope. When we travel, we try to be kind travelers. We try to be generous with the people we visit, I've even talked about, haven't done it yet, but I've even talked about in future on family trips, kind of setting aside, if we go somewhere for a week, setting aside like one day to really be serving the people we're visiting. But I haven't done it. But that's sort of, I know how to do it. I've seen it done enough so that I know how to do it. So, yeah.
The Philanthropy Masterminds podcast is underwritten by DonorSearch, the world leader in donor intelligence solutions. Our producer is Jack Frost. Our theme music is Be My Remedy, composed and performed by House of Say. You can subscribe to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find blogs, webcasts, and CFRE accredited webinars with our featured masterminds at DonorSearch.net or check the show notes and descriptions.